All right.
Okay, welcome back. There's a slight delay, but we'll go ahead and let everybody online jump on while we introduce our judges panel. Again, want to thank everybody up here. We have going across George Nichols, Louis Cadis, Renee Cleary, Ann Sirota, Larry Halfhill, Robbie Shulman, Stelia Zuberakis. We have Bessie Stavropoulos, I know your name, Bessie, and we have Bertha Angels. So to kick off, just kind of really quick across the table, want to know how many years you've either been dancing and performing research and judging. So basically kind of a quick synopsis of your FDF life, but your favorite area of focus as well, kind of as researchers, as dancers, as judges, what you've kind of focused on.
Hi, all. George Nichols, been involved with FDF 31 years, retired last year. This is emeritus speaking, hopefully. What else would you ask?
Favorite area of either research or dance?
Peloponnesos. Better do a good samico for me. That's it.
My name is Louis. I started dancing actually here at St. Sophia sometime in the mid-'80s. My first folk dance festival was in '89. Directed for about maybe 10 years, much later in life, and been judging for a few years. Probably some of my favorite areas are Thrace and Podo.
Hi, Renee Cleary. I've judged at FDF 31 years, counting this year, either as a costume or dance judge, mostly dance judge. Gosh, I came a few years before that, before I got roped into the working position. Gosh, favorite areas of research. I would say I can continuously dance Pontiac more than about anything else, but that to pick a favorite is really hard. The islands tug at me too, and boy, getting in Eleni's Asvestades line is also pretty darn good. So it's there's a lot of areas that really get me. So hard to say.
I've been involved in FDF since 1988. I think this means this is going to be my 30th year is coming up. Been dancing for 50 years almost. And those of you who know me know that Conchin is my favorite and my expertise. I also love Central and Northwest Macedonia and Epirus and Crete. Those are the areas that I think I know the best and like the most.
So Larry Halfhill, I've been dancing for 35 plus years. I took my first dance lessons at the age of 5 to learn Samiko. But I really, so you know, I didn't come to FDF as a dancer until my senior year in college. And I had dance experience before then and then after. I've been a judge for 11 years, and favorite areas, I love Central Macedonia, especially Aridea and Umluki, and Peloponnese has always been a strong favorite.
I started coming just to watch FDF in the early 80s and directed a dance group starting in 88 and have judged since about 97. Been dancing for nigh on 50 years. And favorite areas also include Pontian, Cretan, Macedonian, Thracian, Kalymnos, and a few others that have begun to grow on me.
Hi, Stelia Zuberakis. I think I started dancing in 1987. First dance group that I directed was with my wife Stacy in 94. I don't remember when I became a judge, but I've been involved for a very long time. Favorite regions, probably Crete, but I might be biased. But I've had a lot of fun on stage in various other regions of the island. And, I think one of my favorites was doing Carada, just for the difficulty of it and the solo aspect of it was a lot of fun for me. So.
Hi, Bessie Stavropoulos. I think my first FDF as well was 1987. I taught and danced for 20 plus years, and I really can't pick a favorite because while I was teaching, I dabbled into so many different regions that you kind of go through I went through my I love Crete phase, I love Pontos, but my background is in Ipiros, so that's kind of a favorite of mine. And really, all instrumentation, you hear it and, you just start tapping, so.
Hi, my name is Bertha Angels, and I've been involved with FDF since 1984. I actually got involved with costuming because of my children and the dance group that they were in. They didn't have enough costumes. And so that's how I got involved with costuming. I've been involved with costuming probably for 25 years now. Again, my favorite costumes are probably the most difficult ones, where you can get the parents involved and have them embroider, and even the dancers and things like that. So that's about it.
So since it's down there, I'm going to start with this. Continuing the theme of kind of the FDF cycle, the next part that directors usually do before FDF is some of them end up turning in video research, write-ups, costume research. So starting with, I guess, costume research, as the costume judge, what do you like to see, or what do you need to see from directors, or what do you when they're submitting information about the costumes they're going to be wearing on stage?
Yes, actually that is really important. When you tune in costume information, especially when it's a brand new costume, please do give your information, where you got your research, how you got your research, and even if it is like just a line from somebody, please give us that research so that we know where it came from, and also make sure that you have pictures if you have them, and also the pictures of the actual costume. And also if you can please have it done before, at the time that it's supposed to be turned in, because it's really important, and it's very difficult to judge a costume when we don't have that information.
So then from the rest of the panel, in terms of dance video research or write-ups, what do you guys want to see in terms of timing of submission, organization, and kind of extent of videos, how long they are, and some common pitfalls that just kind of turn you off when you're going through videos or research, and kind of what do you want to see, or what expectations do you want to set for directors?
Well, I think for me, there's a pitfall in just submitting research, period, especially video research. Because if you're going to give me a snippet of 2 minutes of a group and you're going to tell me this is what it's supposed to look like, I'm going to have that up on my surface when you're on stage. Okay, that's, it's either good or bad. In terms of when, as earlier, like the earlier the better. I know most of you have your sets done by January. Have you been there? So, better hope they're done by January. 2 weeks of practice. So submitting that, and you know early on what you're going to do. And it's always easier to submit a research packet and then come back and say, okay, well, we're not doing all those dances. And send an email out to everyone. Getting 30 plus reviews every year the week before FDF, I had a job, 4 kids, and so, do me a favor.
There is a deadline. There is a deadline.
We're going to make it earlier.
Okay, so we're going to make it earlier.
A
Because
month before.
what you guys don't know is that all the paperwork that you send and videos that are sent electronically, because there are still DVDs sent in, correct? So they forward them to all of us judges, and we read the paperwork, we watch the videos. Like for Vasily's, and I need like a week to read his because he's got an entire thesis. But what we do is on Thursday, before opening ceremonies, as early as we can all get there, we're all stuck in a room watching video after video after video because there's no way for all of us to get together unless we explore other options of maybe conference calling prior or,
So,
so I don't know if that helps at all.
So then, we know that there's extremes between no research and turning in a ton of research, no paper and a massive paper. I guess what target do you want to see directors at least hitting a minimum of? And we talked about moving the deadline up so you guys aren't cramming, so you can actually get to watch the stuff and prepare yourselves for what we're going to show you. But from the paper perspective, what do you want to see? Is it necessary, or are the videos more important? I guess provide a good target.
One thought about it, and this comes from questions that have come up from directors, is that you've looked at a lot of videos and there are a lot of differences in what you see. And so sometimes it's helpful to hear all of the resources that you've looked at and the differences that you've seen in it and how you then chose to do or present what you present. Because one, there may be a lift, and one, there's a touch, and one, there's performance, and one, there's the village. And so if you could just kind of briefly let us know all the research and even some of the confusion that you had with the material that was presented or that you reviewed and how you made the decisions about your suite, that gives us a sense of what your thought process is.
I would never tell a new director not to submit something. I think that's helpful for them, period. And even if it's a sort of your run-of-the-mill Cretan set that we've seen 100 times, I would never tell a new director not to work something up and send it in just for their own knowledge.
Well, I guess too, I mean, going across the board, there was a wide variety of interests or expertises, and not everybody can know everything about Greek dance. So, or you may not have seen something as recently as others. What does the video research help you do as judges when you're looking at somebody's show? You just want to put that into words.
For me, I like to see where, usually our comments, one of our major comments is what, do you guys want the mic on that end? I think one of the major comments that we end up writing is who or what are your resources? Because when you don't submit that, not that it's going to change, like, at least for my perspective, like in terms of Pontian. If I know that Moisidis was your source, then you say, oh, that's why that step is like that. Doesn't make it right or wrong, but at least you have clarification of who the source was and why it's danced that way. So,
I think none of us know absolutely everything there is to know about Greek dance in every village and every step. So I think a lot of times submitting information to us about the research that you've done, where it came from, what you learned from it, who you learned it from, helps us. It educates us as well as helping you to put it into words. Actually, to put it down in writing makes the directors sort of be thoughtful and mindful of what they're presenting and why. In terms of reading the material, just to go back to your initial question, I think if you have a lot of information about the context, that's very interesting, that's fascinating to read, but make sure you also include, information about the dancing, and what the singing, what you're actually presenting, rather than just the context, because I think that we're judging you on the suite that you're performing. The context is good to have there, but it's not the only thing that's going to be on stage, so you make sure you include that.
So that's like talking about the dances that you're going to be dancing.
Yes.
And the breakdown steps or the rhythms and the styling that you're presenting for them.
Yes.
Which then your follow-up maybe with your resources that led you to presenting it that way.
It's especially important if you, for example, have found dances from a village that you think has never been presented at FDF before, and you think that we're all going to know a dance done this way because this is the way it's been done for 50 years, and you found a different way to do the dance, make sure you write that in, because many of us may only know the dance that was done, that we've seen 50 times. So as much information as you can put in terms of what you're presenting, it's important. And also, I was going to say one more thing about presenting the research. If you're going to give us videos, please don't give us 5 2-hour videos to watch. Cut out some of it. Cut part of it out. Show, enough for us to know what you're doing, but not like the entire video that you copied off of YouTube. It's, you know, you have to be more selective in how you present it to us.
You basically said what I was going to say.
Yeah, to add to that, some people have submitted like an hour or an hour and a half video, and what they're doing is somewhere hidden in that, but we really can't watch the whole hour and a half to discern what 2-minute dance out of that you're going to do. So if you can edit those things, or at the very least, tell us what number, go to this number or this number, and where we can cue it up to see what pertains to the dances that you're going to be doing. That's very helpful. If you are able to do the edits yourself and just put, you know, like 2 minutes of this, 2 minutes of that, that would be the best. But if you don't have the expertise to do that, at least give us the cue numbers, because truthfully, we're probably not going to go through that hour and a half video to find out. And then we'll see other things on the way, and it won't even be pertaining to your suite. So, and in write-ups, anything that you think might be a little out of the ordinary or a little different, or even if it's fairly well known, just a reminder, we're doing the one from this village, which does it on the offbeat instead of on the beat. Just a little cue there to go, oh yeah, a little memory jogger. The one we're doing, there are other variations, and we're doing this one. So that's a little helpful. We probably don't need 20 pages. I mean, if you're doing something that you think is fairly common, I mean, just a couple pages is probably fine. So we're doing these dances, you commonly see this, this, and this, but we're doing a special thing over there. The advanced seniors, of course, get a little more involved, and they can be a little more specific and lengthy, but probably we don't need 20 pages.
So a big part of what we've been doing here, right, is connecting, let's say, all the directors together with our directors panel, connecting directors with you. I think a light bulb went off at one of our Koinonia workshops this year when Danny Staveris, and Robbie, and I, with some people in Long Beach, were watching videos, and you know, it turned out that Ann and Robbie pointed out, well, yeah, Ann was the one videotaping, Robbie was fourth in line, and you know, Joe Graziosi was, you know, a few up in front of her. So I think what's important for a lot of us directors to understand, especially the younger ones, is many of you, and we touched on this before, have put a lot of time and a lot of your lives invested in doing research, whether firsthand or studying stuff here in the States, so that you can sit on this panel, and that you guys are great resources to reach out to. I know last year you put out your email addresses with your comments, which, you know, was great because people can reach out to you in productive ways afterwards. How can directors, I guess, tap into your wealth of knowledge, and what's the best approach, whether when they're formulating a show or afterwards, you know, instead of coming up to you at the award ceremony when everybody's, you know, tired and emotional from a long weekend? How can we have a more productive dialogue with you about resources and I guess tapping into your knowledge base?
It has to be before September 30th. We are not obligated, or we cannot. We have a rule that we can't work with any group after September 30th, except for December 30th.
They can work only 3 times,
Up to, and then it's none at all.
September 30th, no more than 3 times.
Anyway, get to us quicker then. By the way, you're not obligated to do this, but it shows that you care. It shows us you've done some research. You're showing us that, hey, I've done some work here, but you're not obligated to do it, just so you know that.
So whether they're contacting you guys via email or, let's say, another potential resource, what's the best way to approach that in an email?
I just want to give my perspective. So I've encouraged directors for a long time, as early as possible, to just give me a rough just some rough footage of what they're doing with their early. And some directors, they're very hesitant to do that because they want to show the polished product. So for me, and I probably speak for more than a couple of us, it's much better for me to be involved early in what you're doing in terms of how you're teaching the dance, especially with Division II groups and younger groups. With a Division I group, where the dancers are much more advanced and older, you can bring me in at the deadline to help polish your suite, and that'll work. But with younger groups, that really becomes a problem. We need to be really upfront. So again, I've encouraged to give me a link, send me a DVD, or bring me to your, just tell me when you have practice, and I'll come in and, critique or work with the group. And I always meet with the director beforehand to give, to kind of set the stage for what we want to do. But the earlier the better, and especially for the younger groups.
I think for me, like post FDF, if you want to discuss FDF in general, your suites, send me an email, a couple links. Here are my groups. They're up on the web. Let's make a time to talk. Treat it like any other appointment. Reaching out and asking, for me, is really difficult to get this stuff for various reasons. You can talk to my wife about half of them. But I think that's the best approach. Is treat it like any other appointment that you would, whatever it is.
So then, if a lot of these directors are trying to get a footing in terms of finding research or the right resources for what they want to teach that year, do you guys know people? Can you connect them with people? Do you have information you typically share yourself? How does that work?
I think all of us, either we know things actually. The list of judges, you mean? Yeah, are they in the director's manual? I don't know. But all of us, I think, are accessible by email, and if we can either help or we can refer you back to someone. If you call and say to me, do you know somebody who's an expert in such and such, I would give you, well, you can try this person, this person, this person, if they're not already on the judging list. A lot of the experienced dance directors are there to help as well, I believe. I don't know anybody who has always has said no to helping other communities. And we can be reached by email. Some of us can be reached by Facebook Messenger, regular message, texting. There's any number of ways to access. And I want to clarify the timing, that we are limited to working with groups. We can work with groups up to 3 times up until December 30, between September and December 31st. We can work up to 3 times with any one group. And we cannot, if we're going to be a judge that year, we cannot work with any group. We cannot give you feedback either on a video or in reel. We cannot come and watch a rehearsal. We cannot give you any consultation after December 31st.
So you guys have a lot of your own research, but you also know a lot of people who make a living off of the research they've done. And that becomes a challenge too sometimes as to when is it okay to share a video or to give away research when it may or may not be yours to give away. Not everybody's lucky enough to have people within their communities that can pass down great research. What are some restrictions that, does this hold us back as a community of directors and judges from really getting out good information and teaching well? Are there ways around this? What are those ways that directors can get around that? And is that just going to the source and getting permission? What do you guys recommend there?
It depends what it is.
A lot of these sources have spent their whole life doing this work and gathering their research. So if there's a cost that's associated with getting that material, it makes sense. They've spent their own time, their own money to go to the villages to gather the information. So it's not an unreasonable expectation to spend a little money to also tap into their resource. It wouldn't be fair if I spent that money, let's say, to do that, and then I just gave it away to somebody else for free. So this is part of the process. I know there's a lot that goes into the budgets for dance programs, but gathering that research and and doing it early, like a lot of the directors said, is important. So put something aside in the budget for that.
But ultimately, yes, it holds us back.
There's free resources available. If
You
you
wanna
can
talk
get,
about this, Ann?
if you get the videos from YOFA International, International Organization of Folk Arts, they're available for free. I have some, of course, MVHS, so they have to be converted. But I don't know if Maria still, George, is Maria Kiriakou still doing that? Yeah, she's, Maria Kiriakou from Northridge has the whole set of YOFA that belong to Charlie, so I think she's still able to provide those. You just have to contact her. I don't know, there's some of the YOFA stuff is all you can find it even on YouTube. You just, again, when you watch YouTube, someone said you have to be judicious about what you're watching.
So I think we've talked a lot about vetting research already, and I think research in general is knocked out of the park, so we'll move on a little bit. Many of you have been directors. There's a lot of directors here that either teach Division 1 or Division 2. Is there a different philosophy in your mind with what you see or what should be presented as a Division 1 group versus a Division 2 group based on age and everything else?
So I want to lead it off on this one. So I still think of FDF as a ministry. It's really, if you want to go way back, it's almost an extension of your youth programs. In Division 2, I mean, it's everything from Division 1. It's all in your manuals about how we divide up our scoring and everything we're looking for. For me, I want to see that you as directors have taught your kids how to dance and stage, but when I see a program created with all this context, and you have dancers sitting down, dancers going back and forth, you're trying to create this great performance, which is great on the performance side, but then I'm wondering, why are 4 out of your 12 dancers sitting to the side, and why are a different 4 sitting out in this next suite? And it all comes back to me that I really believe that every single one of those kids should be up and dancing, and I want to see that the directors have really taught that. That's my Division 2 philosophy.
Does that kind of hit home across the board?
I agree, especially about Division 2. I think Division 1, it depends, but I'd like to see the most dancers possible on the stage at any time for every group, even Division 1, if possible. I know Division 1 is different because, especially advanced seniors, it's different because you're creating a whole scene, and sometimes that requires a different setup. But for most groups, I like to see almost every dancer up on stage, and dancing for every dance.
Go ahead.
Jumping off on what Larry said about, it being a ministry and involving all kids, it also means when you start with Division 2 kids, and I'm not Greek and I'm not Orthodox, but nevertheless, with your Division 2 kids, what you do with them in the very beginning is going to determine whether they end up on this stage or they end up as advanced directors or whatever. And if they're given the wrong material early on or not taught how to move, how to dance, if they don't have that foundation of dancing, they're not going to develop, they're not going to stay, and they're not going to continue in FDF. So it's really, from what I see, very important with your younger kids to build that foundation of how to dance and how to move, how to hop and how to skip and all of those basic things. And this has nothing to do with what you give to those primary kids. Because we used to say, oh, they can't do those hard dances. But there are directors here who have totally proved us wrong, and you have primary kids doing advanced, complicated Macedonian rhythms. So it's not that you only do certain dances for the younger kids. You do what your kids are ready and able to do, but you help them have that foundation so that they can do it.
Just another opinion on quote-unquote benching dancers. I get it. I know why you put half your group down so you can make it around in a minute and not badushka. I understand. That doesn't bother me at all. Because I know that 3-minute badushka is going to cost you another dance that you wanted to do. So just to completely differentiate with my fellow judges, I understand. I understand the kid that didn't make it, to have the practices because he had softball or baseball or whatever else it is. So you're not going to get that, at least for me. That's all.
You want to pass it down to Lee?
Yeah.
Having also been a director like Daniel, I also agree that there's definitely circumstances and sometimes a vision of a show, even for Division II kids. But I'll also agree with Robbie on the foundation. So many times, I think most of the judges would agree, we see groups that try too much in the sense that they don't have the foundation, they don't have the basic how to hold a circle, how not to fall over themselves while they're dancing in line, and yet the groups are being pushed to do 10 figuras, let's say, where when they don't have the actual basic step, how to hold themselves in line, how not to have jello arms. So the foundation is the most important thing, how the circle looks, how to hold themselves, how to carry their body. Dance is not just steps, it's the entire body from the head down.
So Louis, I know you have an interesting philosophy too in terms of teaching rhythm instead of just teaching steps as well. Or you or Renee, whoever wants to speak to that.
Yeah, the standard that I've seen most directors do is, okay, here's the step. What comes before the step? Anyone? The music. You have to listen to the music. You have to play the music for the kids. When Vicki and I used to teach the little kids, the Division III kids years ago, we would put on different melodies with different rhythms and ask them, how does this dance go? And they would completely make up their own dances. And it was great. They had the best time doing it. But the key was to get them to listen to the music, to listen to the rhythm, to listen to the melody, and that has to be the foundation. And I'm sure when directors were talking about how they prepare or how they decide what shows they want to do, what regions, they listen to the music. Before I would teach a set, I would listen to that area I'd listen to the music for 2-3 years before I'd even start teaching anything. So I think those are the things that sometimes directors try too much. They want to get figuras in, they want to have their kids do slaps and all that, but just breaking things down to the most simplest thing, being in a nice circle, how their movement is, and getting the basic step down. The timing, for me the biggest issue is timing. If you're not listening to the music, you may know the step, you may be synchronized as a group on the step, and you're just totally off, you've lost the style because the kids have never heard the music. One of the directors mentioned playing different melodies of the same dance. That trains your kids not to rely on just, I learned the step and this is the dance. They have to listen to the music. Maybe it's a different tempo, maybe a different key. So those are the things you have to focus on, especially for Division II.
Yeah, rhythm, Division II, I remember this year there were several issues where I said, rhythm problems, rhythm problems, rhythm problems. And I remember one group in particular, I'm sure they were surprised they didn't place higher because they did a very polished show. They were all together, they were dynamic. They were doing the steps correctly, but they were dancing irrelevant to the music. They would have done better if they had turned the music off, because if they were still able to all be together. But they were not dancing in rhythm with the music at all. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did the director not know? I mean, they had obviously rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed because they were quite an impressive group. but they were not dancing to the music, to the rhythm of the music at all. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if you aren't dancing to the rhythm of the music, you don't have to dance. You're doing something out there, but you're not dancing. So, I mean, yes.
And part of that too is breaking down sometimes your teaching perspective on the rhythm rather than just counting 12 steps to a Kalamati no.
Somebody said something about music. This may be a little off, but when you're live music, are we going to go on to that? Anything with live? When you bring in live music, I mean, everybody assumes that's going to be a big asset, and in many ways it can be. But sometimes, if you are not able to, I know some people have to bring in their live music, and they only get to rehearse once, maybe twice with the group, and it's not enough for the kids to connect with that live music, and it's actually detrimental to some of the, I mean, it can obviously be a huge asset, but be mindful, are you going to be able to have some time to actually have the kids work with the musicians so they are able to, and so that the musicians are aware of what the dancers are going to need. Like, okay, I know that you usually play this song for 5 minutes, but you can't in this case. And some of the musicians have a hard time getting that concept, but and I've seen others work really well, where one of the dancers is cueing the musicians because he's come to the right spot on the floor to end the dance, and it works beautifully. But you do have to have that communication ahead of time, so otherwise it may not be the best idea for your kids. I mean, some people go, well, we're going to have, the big kids have live music, so we want the little kids to have live music too. But if it just makes them apprehensive and not confident, it might not be the best decision.
So, moving on just for the sake of time, we want to make this whole event a lot more about just winning or losing at FDF. But obviously, your role as judges there is to judge a competition as well, which is a component and probably something a lot of people are interested in. Greek dancing is different from figure skating in terms of figure skating has elements that everybody has to hit, levels of difficulty. It's very structured and easy to judge because you know exactly what boxes you have to check. You guys are seeing a lot of different shows with a lot of different elements and a lot of different contexts and different regions and different music. And on top of that, FDF and shows have evolved over time. And what you guys have seen from directors and shows have evolved and progressed in different ways. So it's kind of a moving target as well. What are you guys looking from directors and from shows? And can you make it can you tag that from, what you want from a performance and tag some tangible action items that directors can work on to achieve kind of what you want to see?
I think personally my biggest priority when I'm watching a performance is, does the group understand the music? Going back to the rhythm, and not just basic rhythm, but even the timing. If you don't understand the music, you will not be in the style of what you're performing. So everything for me hinges on that. Everything else follows.
So, for me, just a couple quick takeaways. One, again with the live music, there's so many times where I watch groups using live music, and I have depending on the area, there's an expectation that there is so much you can do with live music in a dance group. If you've done the research and you can see the possibilities. I come from the time where we used to actually sit with a sound technician in a reel-to-reel tape to try to cut the music to get it to synchronize with what I want the dancers to do and what I want from them in terms of singing and interaction with musicians. And you have a wonderful opportunity with live music to teach that from the beginning and to really integrate it in your suite. But oftentimes I see live music as just an extension of, press and play on the sound system. So
So is that evolving that so that your dancers are not just connecting with music, but connecting with the musicians as a part of that show? How does it go beyond just that press and play?
Yeah, so, which is the second part, which is I'm always looking for context, but context does not mean every area of Greece does not present a suite of dances of their strongest dances all in the same setting. So when I see groups using the stage more multidimensionally, which means it's not like a diorama where we're sitting here at our table and you have your presentation there, where the dancers start really understanding that there's an interaction with musicians, there's an interaction with each other. When a leader is leading, he's not just leading when they're in the front of the stage, it's all the time. Everything has to be happening. Because I'm watching the entire stage, not the best dancers in the front and whoever's been put in the back and whoever's sitting. I want to see the whole thing, and I want to understand that the dancers understand how they're relating to each other, not necessarily to a void where there's an audience.
I think the directors made so many valid points of what we're looking for. Like Stacy mentioned, I want to be left with wanting to see more. There's that excitement, like, wow, that group was really good. And I guess this goes back to the foundation of the dancing too. I think too many groups, now you can teach them the steps, and it's just robot, 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 robot. So I actually might enjoy the group that might not look so polished, but you see the passion within the dancers. You see that the leader wasn't just trained to do that, that he actually feels it and goes a little bit beyond what was taught. So it's a tough thing to answer just flat out, but I would like to see dancing, not so much performing, if that makes sense.
I also loved what the directors up here said, and I agree in terms of what everybody has said here, in terms of the rhythm and the beat and the connection to the music, but the intangible is that your kids are natural dancers. And what does that mean? I mean, natural means interaction, not with the music, but with each other, that they're connected to each other, and that they're enjoying it. When you see that they're enjoying each other and they're enjoying the dance, that's what takes 3 suites and then elevates one way above the rest. Improvisation. Some dances from some regions have a lot of it, some have very little, but improvisation can be something as little as, what does the lead person do with his or her mandili? What does the girl or guy on the end do? What individuality sort of stands out, where it's not robot, it's not cookie cutter, but there's expression even within the group and in the middle of the line. Some of those things are often things that will just take it right off the ground.
Really wanted to echo what Robbie was saying, because that's kind of the way I look at it too. And I wanted to add one more thing, and that's a sense of wholeness, a sense of holistic quality, that there's a wholeness to the suite. It's not, okay, dance number 1, stop, dance number 2, stop, dance number 3. It doesn't mean that you have to do every dance, you know, without a break, like some of the advanced senior groups do, but it's more, there's a sense that there's a connection with all the dances together, that they're actually putting on a suite as opposed to a series of dances. Now I realize, if you go to a Glendi in Greece, there a lot of times the dances blend one into another, into another, into another. Or you'll have one dance that lasts 45 minutes with 10 songs in those 45 minutes, but it's the same dance. But there's still that sense of you're dancing continually as opposed to stopping, dancing, stopping and dancing. And I think this is kind of what I'm looking for, a feeling of that in the suite when you're putting that on.
I remember being asked years ago, what do you people want? How can we please you? And a lot of that has been discussed already today, and the directors who are up here were very cognizant of the types of things that we want. But the simplest answer is, what does it look, try to capture, what does it look like when the real people do it in the Jornal? And then you have to figure out a way to make it only 10, 12 minutes long and to make it a bit interesting on the stage for FDF. But basically, we want the natural versus the artificial. And we want to see that the kids are comfortable with the material. Sometimes they come out and they look like they're petrified and like, and it's not so much that they don't want to dance. They are all up there and you can tell. When they're done, they are happy and they wanted to dance. But I think they just have to, has to be enough rehearsal that they've done it the way they're going to do it so many times that it's like second nature, and they are comfortable with it, and they are comfortable with each other, so that they can have those little nuances and inflections that, you know, like was also said, cookie cutter. There's parameters to each style and each step, but they're parameters. There's a little bit of individuality that's available to each person, and it's good to see, oh, Eleni always dances like Eleni, even no matter what dance she's doing. And you can incorporate that in your group. You can watch your kids dance and see, oh, that person is a little more flamboyant, that person's a little more reserved. And they can retain that within the set of the style that you're doing. But it's okay to have that little bit of difference. But mostly that the kids are comfortable with what they're doing. It really makes a difference. You can have two identical suites, and when one group feels comfortable with it and the other group is very, you know, like, I have to do this perfect or it's gonna be a problem. It really makes a difference. Get your kids to feel comfortable with what they're doing.
You guys see a lot of different shows, and you know, Renee, you kind of touched on, let's say you have two Thracian shows back to back, you can separate it, but let's say you have a Thracian and Island and you know, an Epiro show. How do you guys, is it just this feel, this sense of presentation and connection to the music that you guys are talking about? I mean, how do you really start to compare shows from different regions in the fields? Stelio?
Is this under the assumption that all three are done in perfect styling, perfectly performed, perfectly executed, all things equal? I think that's an impossible question.
Yeah, I mean, let's say, all things equal, like, is there a difference in difficulty between regions or
well, you're asking
styling?
me, so that's an easy answer for someone who's biased like me. But no, I think it's an impossible question to answer. Every suite's going to be different. You're not going to have every group that's going to do every dance perfectly right. It just doesn't happen. The music might be off. Someone might not have live music. Someone might, and it might be detrimental to the group. Someone else might have more experience with that, and can, you know, the musicians are quick to change the beat to catch the kids up, or, you know, there's so many nuances to that. It's almost, I think, impossible to answer for me.
Is there anything else to add? Or? So I mean, he hit it home, but let's put it this way.
16 Greek opinions, okay?
Not an easy task. This is probably one of the hardball questions I have. You know, there's so many villages and regions, kind of like we talked about across Greece, that no one can expect you or anybody else to know everything. So, and again, going back to the importance of research and turning in research, if somebody and a director's in turning research and it's something you guys are less familiar with, how do you go about judging that show?
Being one of the newer members of the judging panel, we also learn and we also evolve how we look at things. I remember my first year, I thought I was going to be the next Nikos Avidis. For those of you that don't know, he used to be known as Captain Zero. Because I would see things and say, oh, that's horrible, how could they do this all wrong? And then over time you start to kind of find your own space. Kind of going back to what you asked about seeing different shows. Guys, we're all human. We all see things in our own perspective, and I may just like one show better than another show because something pulled at me. The flip side of that is, the better I know something, the better chance is that a group will get a lower score rather than a higher score, because I'll be more critical about that show. Whereas something I know less about, if it looks good and I don't catch anything that's blatantly off, they may get a pass. So it doesn't always work, you know, hey, Ann knows Pontian, so Pontian's gonna do well. No, Ann knows Pontian very well, you probably better do Pontian very well.
Do you guys confer at all, or is your score? Do you guys watch it all?
The only conferring is done before. Thursday night we're watching videos. That's the only time that's conferring.
Yeah, and we may, even within the judging panel, we don't always agree on things. Surprise.
Larry, you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the level of difficulty. So obviously we all recognize certain areas have an extremely difficult style. So when you see it on stage done stylistically beautifully, obviously it's going to make an impression. But it's a difficult question because there's some areas where you look at the material and say, well, it's common knowledge among directors that you can't do that material in Division 1 because it's too easy, or it's very difficult to pull it together in a context. Some dances are only done the day before, let's say the day after Easter, and some dances are during a Bucharest, and you can't, how do you pull that together? Well, sometimes you have to think a little out of the box to do that. But there's no easy answer on difficulty, but I've personally seen some of these less difficult suites done in Division 1 where I've scored them very well because the styling was beautiful, and they tried to pull it together in a nice context, and you got a very nice show out of it.
And I mean, you go ahead.
To kind of build on that, I think a common misperception of difficulty, do a statria and do it very well and with correct styling. That's probably the hardest thing you can do as a performing group. It's easy to do, let's say, Cretan and learn Talimia okay, but take young kids and have them show styling, correct styling from Epiro or from Thessalia, and you've just accomplished something that very few people can accomplish. So, you know, what's easier, what's simpler? The simplest dances may be the hardest to teach and to actually perform, in my opinion.
So what are some other misconceptions then? I mean, people talk as directors, and they get all bent out of shape if a mandili falls or a costume piece falls off, you know. And what about like uses of props? Whether it's you have like, you know, for a while people were building a whole village on stage. You know, how does that all come into context with how you're viewing a show? Can you dispel or support some of those perceptions? George hasn't said anything at all.
Okay, as far as costume pieces falling on stage, please tell your dancers that is, I've had people going, oh, there's how many deductions for that? And there's no deductions for that. In fact, if something falls and you have a clever way of retrieving it, you're going to get bonus points for having been shown ahead of time what to do when something goes wrong, and you are able to step right up and fix the situation. We don't want to see kids in dangerous situations dancing back and forth over a sash that's unwrapping. Pick it up, throw it over your shoulder. I've seen various things. When a kid gets to the back of the stage, sometimes they go off stage and their director wraps them back up, and then they end up back in the line and the next time it goes around. There's think about those things ahead of time. Tell your kids what to do when those things happen. It's not like the elephant in the room, like we pretend it's not there and it'll go away and nobody's noticing it on the judging panel. We're like, oh my gosh, how many kids are gonna fall down because of, yeah. So now on the other hand, if it looks like a garage sale out there because 10 people have lost costume pieces, well, then that's not a very prepared group. But please address this with your kids. Tell them, you know, if your mandili falls off, if your sash starts to come undone, this is what you do. And if a boy can pick up his partner's mandili and offer it back to her in a gentlemanly way, that's a plus. That's not a minus. Now, extra context on stage. Context is great. Have a reason for it. Some groups, it's everything is totally necessary for what they've done, and it adds to it. But if you put stuff there just to put stuff there, like this group did really well and they had all this stuff on the stage, so let's put all this stuff on the stage, and then you do nothing with it, or there's not really any reason for it, it's like we're going, okay, why is all that stuff there? Why are those two adults sitting back there when 12-year-olds are dancing? Are they just giving them moral support, or what's, you know, they have no real connection with it. So we don't want extra stuff. If it has a purpose, fine, but if it really doesn't have a purpose except like I thought it would look good to put something on the stage, not so much.
I was just going to say, you said everything I wanted to say. One thing is you can use the tables that are two standard tables they have back there with your small group to keep them forward rather than way back in the curtains where they get lost. It's a good place to move them up, keep the kids in the front. Otherwise, don't use all those props.
There's a term that I learned from Dr. Mary Koros called intelligent recovery. And you need to teach your dancers making a mistake isn't a bad thing. It's what your reaction is to that mistake. If you do the freak out face on stage, it's going to be obvious. If you just keep going and catch the beat again and you're totally comfortable doing that, for the most part, most of the judges won't even notice, or they may even notice like, oh wow, that kid got off beat, but he caught it right away. And that's much better than doing the freak out face.
I was going to say, one dancer making a mistake, or even two dancers making a mistake, does not affect the overall evaluation of your group. I think that, you know, more power to you if you can get people in there who, you know, encourage dancers to get up there on stage and, you know, do as best as they can.
So, having been guilty of using heavy props in the past and coming from the most prop-heavy church, I might have a slight bias, but I mean, and agreeing with George at the end there, you know, having a table, chairs, boxes, whatever, to move your kids up or take up more of the stage, things like that, I gloss over it. I mean, it's there. Okay, great. Oh, they used it. Okay, great.
When the group is so big and they're tripping over the boxes.
We need to bench half the group, obviously. I just. If they're not using it well, then that can be detrimental to you, sure. On the mandili side, Renee nailed it. Just pick the thing up. I don't want to see your dancers fall. I've had my share of dancing, you know, quirks, groups, kids jumping off stage, falling off the back of the stage. Although on the note of intelligent recovery, and not to my credit at all, I had a dancer whose knife was falling out, the big Cretan knife was falling out on stage. And he managed to slap it back in place while he was doing his slaps. And that was George, yeah. So, but again, it was something you notice afterwards. I was not judging that year, I was dancing that year, but still, it was something you notice. You know, I'm sure the judges noticed when it was happening, as you slowly see this sheath just come out. Oh God, what's going to happen? Oh, that was good. I think that intelligent recovery is great.
So with the mic down there, then we're going to move into scoring next. But I want to hit Bertha first. You know, there's a score that the dance judges give. That's a costume score, and there's a costume judge that judges the costumes as well. And again, I'm sure this is all in the director's manual, but can you kind of break down what you look for when you judge a costume, how that impacts the overall score of the group, and how that compares to the score that these judges give?
Well, what I look for first is when you come out and I look at the costume on stage. Is it worn well? Is it worn correctly? For older groups, I also look, is it appropriate? Do you have a mainland costume for a mainland suite? I look at, are all the costumes the same? Because that is something that I probably am a little bit more biased to as to score. I like to see costumes to be different because they're not all the same. So you don't have 10 the same aprons. They're all a little bit different because all the women used to sit and do their own kind of embroidery, and they were not all the same. The women didn't do it all the same. So you have to kind of look a little bit also at the history behind that. And then when you come to me, I'd look and say, I'm sure all of you have been to me and I pull your costume apart, and I always apologize for that. But I have to look and see if all the pieces are there, are all, you know, so do you have your chemise? If there is a petticoat under that, are you wearing that? Or is that part of the costume? Is the costume made by the community? Have you bought the costume? And sometimes the score is not necessarily lower if you have bought this costume, but if the costume has been made, handmade by the community, it is more apt to get a costume award, unless there is nothing else in the category. So there's a lot of things that I look at, and then I also, when it is handmade, is it made properly? Or, you know, do you have your pieces that are supposed to be in there? And so I look at it at many different things. And if your costume does fall on the stage, most of the time you'll find that I'll show you or tell you how to put a sash on properly, or the mantilla so it doesn't fall off. So you can always come to me and ask me that. And is there anything else?
So now does your score impact, let's say, just the costume award, or is it incorporated also into the
As of this year, it has not made a difference in the dance, so it's not part of the dance score. We have been talking about it, and I don't know if we voted on it or if there has been a decision made, but we have been talking about that our score will be part of the dance score. And it probably will be in a less percentage if that happens. But it hasn't been decided. It hasn't been decided. We have only talked about it.
For the last 15 years.
As of now, there's a 4% score, costume score on the dance score, which the dance judges give. And they look at we all look at it a little bit differently of how to give that score. But we've been talking for a long time about having the costume judge give that score, and it would be added into the dance score. But right now, it has not been definitely decided.
So that's, unless Bessie has something else to add, that's a good segue, and I'll let you start, Bessie, and if you want to add on to this. You know, we've gone from very subjective, right, given everything you see and how you perceive a show when you're judging a show. And we can start with Bessie. I know George has a lot to say about it too, but maybe can we talk about going from that subjective to really the straightforward or mechanical with how what you see is broken down into scores, and what those scores are, and how each dance receives a score, for example.
I wanted to add on the costume score that we give 4%, but I think across the board, we all feel like the costume judge should be giving that score. And I don't think what we give ever truly will affect or make somebody go from like first to second but what's important for me with that costume score is that I look at the overall presentation. This is a presentation, so you're going to notice when costumes are sloppy, and so that's where the costume comes in for us on that presentation column. So what was the next part you wanted to?
Well, I think George has one thing you want to add there too.
We are told as judges that no matter what you wear, you can come out with all black and a red sash and do pirotica or whatever you want to do. We cannot deduct for what you're wearing. But I can't help but think psychologically, subconsciously, it's got to affect us judges some way, somehow. So, as far as costumes go, your score should not be affected by what you're wearing. Yeah, it was drilled to us from day one. But we have 4% to play with.
Okay, I want to say that differently. Your costume does not have to match the dances that you're doing. There is no deduction for that. The costume score does reflect our opinion of the quality of your costume, but it's only 4% of your total score on the dance sheet. But we are not allowed to deduct from that score if your costume does not match you. We understand people can't make new costumes every time they learn new dances, but you try to match as closely to what would be appropriate for the area, of course.
So from a dance perspective, if you go into the manual, the director's manual, I know that there is a preparation, a presentation, and a performance score that is given to each dance.
Ethnic quality preparation.
Ethnic quality. You can expand on that. That's okay. I'll let you talk to it. So, what's considered, or what do you go through when deciding how to score each one of those areas for each dance? Because I mean, you're per show.
I think every judge does it differently and uses their own criteria, and sometimes criteria will also change depending on division or category. So, do you want each of us to give our specific?
Maybe if there's groups that kind of feel or kind of look at things similarly, but we can have a few just to take the time, talk about what preparation is, what presentation is, or what performance is, and kind of, I mean, maybe just talk to the mechanics of it then, maybe more than subjectivity.
I know for myself personally, I like to look at the show holistically. It's very hard for me to sit there dance by dance and break it down. I have to look at it as a whole, and I have to give my assessment as a whole. So that's how I do it personally.
That's also how I do it. Having gone home, I write down all of my scores that I give out to each group. And after FDF years ago, I went home and I did all the calculations, and it turned out that my own scores were not reflecting my own opinion. And in other words, the group I liked the best, I had not ultimately scored the highest because I was divvying up all these numbers all around all these little classifications. So I have now come to the conclusion that for me, the most accurate way for me to score is to do it in a more holistic way also. I make notes during the performance, but I tend to come up with one evaluation of the whole entire thing, rather than breaking it down into each little box. Because in that way, what my final evaluation is, I can tell more accurately how I'm placing a group that I prefer over another group in the quality of what I evaluate their performance to be.
I tend to look at the suite holistically as well. How good was the suite? But I do look, in judging each group, I look at the style, the ethnic quality, meaning how accurate is the style and the step. So that's the first thing. And if the step is basic. So if the step is correct, then I look at, are they approximating the style of the region that they're dancing? And the preparation score is how well has the director prepared the dancers? Are they on the beat? Do they understand the music? Are they dancing with the music? Are they connecting with each other? And then, the performances, how well are they projecting? Are they feeling it? And it's very hard to really differentiate these three. They affect each other so much. It's a real, it's a real blend. That's why finally, even though I look at all those aspects, my score is really reflecting what does it look like on stage? Is it exciting to watch? Is it exciting not in the sense that the kids are all jumping up and down, but is it engaging? Are we watching? Are I feeling that from the dancers? Are they projecting the audience? Are they enjoying what they're doing? And then I look at each group and I say, okay, which one of these groups has done the best job, representing the dances that they're doing, reflecting the choreo, reflecting the performance. And then I put in the scores, the final scores for each group.
Do all of the judges' scores are kept for each group for each round, or?
Yes, we each keep all of our score sheets from that category, for each category. But now it's different because we're doing it online. So we have the entire category on the computers, and we can adjust the scores as we go.
So then mechanically, the next step, you guys have all put in your scores based on how you viewed the shows. The next step is to come up with those averages based on days and different weights provided each day, right?
Yeah, so the computer does it automatically. The scoring program does it.
Do you want to talk, or George, do you want to talk to us? Somebody wants to talk to how that works?
We have 10 minutes between the primary to advanced primary, let's say. And in those 10 minutes, we're free to adjust our scores if we want to adjust them. Well, let's say the first group came out as a 6, but no one was better. Those scores are way too low. So we have to go in and adjust. Or the first group came out was a 6, and it was the best one. We have to go back and adjust our scores. So we have that 10 minutes to do it. So once we see you and score you, that doesn't mean that's your final score yet. We can adjust if we want.
So more importantly, though, once you guys have the score set, you have a score for each day, which I think people are aware of. And I know there's always questions as to, well, how was I second and fifth and ended up, sixth? So maybe talk to that.
So I think the paperwork explains the actual percentages, but semifinal round is weighted less. So let's say everybody gave you a 10 on your semifinal, all the judges, then you would get a 4.5 because it's 45%, let's say, and then they add the final round, which is the 55%. The math is the math. It's pretty straightforward. The reason why.
48-52, but.
Okay. The reason why you may see that one day I was in first place and I didn't place at all is the difference. You may have gotten a final round ranking of 5th place, but the spread of the score is what's going to ultimately determine, because at the end you just add up the numbers. That we as judges have no control outside our own individual scores. We put our scores in, they're completed, they get turned in to the board, and then all the tabulations are done. And believe it or not, even we get surprised at times. Why did this group play? So I thought they were great. Well, we don't see both shows. We only see one show for each group. So that's why you would see that happening.
So let's close this life cycle, especially because we're definitely over. And I kind of want to go back to reiterate this. You guys don't have a lot of time to necessarily write notes when you guys, or a ton of constructive notes or detailed notes when you're going through this process in your mind of watching shows, putting in scores, comparing groups in your mind. What's the best way for directors to get constructive feedback from you what's the timing and how should they go about that? I know Stelios touched on it before, but maybe we can drive that home one more time. Somebody want to take that? Bessie?
Yeah, I'll take it. This year being the first year that we did computers, I was actually really lucky and all my comments were gone from my first two categories. So, oh yeah, Louis was a lucky one too. So we're sitting there, you know, printing, typing away our comments, and then come advanced intermediate, because this was day one, none of our comments are there. So what I ended up doing is I couldn't submit anything in the time frame that they need to get the comments out. I went back after FDF and I looked up all the groups that I could, whatever was available, and gave so many better comments than what I would in that 10 minutes. And the ones that I couldn't find, I left them my email, phone number, and I said, if you can, send me the video and I'll give you any comments. Which I never heard anything back from any of that, but it's right after FDF, give it a week maybe,
Well,
just for everyone to rest up and
even beyond that, right? I mean, for you to be able to recall a show, you probably even have to watch it again just because of all the shows that you've seen throughout the weekend. So should directors, and again, because it's all about improving how directors go about things the next year and grow and get feedback, whether it's their research or their styling or their preparation, you know, should they wait for the video to come out, send you a link, have some questions ready, and like Stella said, set up a timer?
Yes.
yes, across the board, I don't know if anybody else. A link is usually, I think, an email with a link is great because you have it right there. The Vimeo is probably a different perspective from the other cameras versus if they send us a link of, you know, a parent that sent something or videoed. But yeah, I think we're all available after. We won't bite you on the first visit. You know?
The comments took a really long time this year. Hopefully it won't this year.
And I mean, as a director, I mean, that 6-month period that we're talking about changing, that we're all focused on Greek dance and stuff, because you put so much time and energy into it that you get burnt out. And FDF is done, and you're almost like, okay, back to my American life, right? But the reality is, you know, you listen and go back to what a lot of the directors that were on the panel were saying. Their preparation is almost constant. Their reflection is almost constant. Where, let's say March, April come out, the videos come out, you get excited, you post it on Facebook, send a link to everybody up here or the people that you want to get feedback from, and start that dialogue, especially if you're going to repeat your show the next year. Start that preparation early, and I think that's the biggest takeaway I could have, because everybody up here is an excellent resource. They have a wealth of information, a huge network that they can connect you with, and I think a lot of us, whether we're working together as directors or working with the judges, can continue to improve and really continue to bolster this system. So, George? Yeah.
You see your daughters are walking away.
This year, the comments were sent out to each individual. You didn't see the comments of everybody else in your category. Previous years, the comments went out for each category. So if you're an advanced primary director, you saw all the comments for all the advanced primaries. Did you like that better, or do you like it just seeing your own?
Liked it better.
Did you care that your comments were in there?
No.
If you look at the reverse.
Even if they're not good?
No, I liked that better.
Even if it's just for learning purposes, like maybe some group does something from Letos and you have no idea about anything Letos, you can at least know like, oh, well, yeah, like,
Good or bad?
exactly, yeah, like maybe they didn't do that dance right, but I can, now that I know what it is, I can at least figure out how to do it better. It's like when they did the Vimeo and they took what dances were off the Vimeo 2 years ago. It was super confusing because if you had no idea what it was, you'd be lost.
Any questions from the crowd?
Yeah.
So what was that, Vicky?
You want to see all the scores and the comments for everybody in your category.
No, that's easy.
Oh, for everybody.
Yeah, because sometimes one group did really good their semifinal day, but bad their final day, but they overall got first place. And you want to know, well, guess that their final day, you want to know
let's table this and we can have some.
Wait a minute, I'm confused. Are you saying that you want to see the composite scores?
We want to see, like, so if I just direct the junior category, but I wanted to know how the advanced junior group did, yes, I can find a director in that category and get it, but
I like to watch all of FDF sometimes and know how it's scored.
But you see the
Yes.
the composites, the finals
The same as they get now, but for
for
all
all
the
the groups,
groups.
not just that category.
And we used to get them.
I agree with Elaine because I think we use that information, like your comments and how they rank, as an educational tool, and I think as part of our research and our resource, because if we know that you guys like a certain style this way, then we go, okay, let's look at it, see what they liked, see what they hated. Without you guys giving us that information, you actually took something away from our learning process.
We have a question up here in the front. Couple.
I have a couple. After reading the notes, there was a kind of a general sheet from Dr. Mary.
Of course, yeah.
And so it confused me a little bit because we had this really interesting, what I felt, research, and we wanted to somehow express that in that 10-minute window. But when I read the notes, I got confused with, it almost sounded like we needed to look like we were, I know we're doing a performance, but there's sort of a fine line of expressing this interesting research like the tipping without making it look messy. Ours in particular had, you tip musicians and things like that. So how do you do these transitions without looking messy? Or what's more important, looking like you're doing a clean performance? I don't mean looking like a performance group and doing steps wrong. I mean how clean it's supposed to look versus...
That's the hardest part of it. How do you choreograph? Natural. You have to, in a way. The best groups will be choreographed and you'll never realize that they're choreographed. That's the difference. And Dr. Mary Cloris's perspective, she's PhD in dance, so she sees things from a certain perspective, but I've seen her work and I've seen she's helped groups that I used to direct and others in the community. I know she's worked with Vasily, and what you see that looks so natural has been worked on over and over again to get it there. Don't leave anything to chance. Now, you can see if something looks like it's acting versus it's happening naturally, but I always grew up with the philosophy of practice the way you want to perform in the game, whether it's in basketball or in dance. So in your practices, don't be lazy about doing those transitions. Like, okay, and then you're just going to do the tip. Like, no, that is part of your show. The difficulty is getting it to look like it's natural, getting that movement so it's not where you see 100 people on stage hugging and kissing every time. Like, you want to show something, you have to choreograph it.
Right, it almost sounded like she wanted all of your dances to be continuous with no break at all. No break at all between dances. It almost sounded like that when I read it. And also, another question was, should you dance on stage and dance off? Is it okay to just be there on stage with the lights down and then turn them on? What is the best way, or is there a way?
They're both one. They're both one. They're all fun.
I think this goes back to it's all preference, and it's all what Eleni mentioned about this is my vision. If you have a vision of starting your performance like that, then start on stage, if that's what you want them to do. If you want them to dance on or dance off because there's some meaning to the way they huddle and dance off, then it's...
If you want to do the mic drop, lights out. I mean, it really is. It's your vision. It's what
yeah, those little things where, I mean, you might get a comment like, oh, it would have been nice for you to dance off, because when I taught, I used to get comments like that, and I thought, this is not a constructive comment for my group. So thank you for the opinion. I wanted them to stop on stage. So anyways.
We pay attention to those things. If the music's if the music sort of, if the lights go out and the music's still playing and slowly goes out, I get it. The party continues. Like
Yeah.
And then I just have one last question. One of the comments on our sheet was, we have live musicians, we should utilize them more. Would it be appropriate to have, for example, somebody in our group singing one verse and the musician another, if that's something that was done in that region? I mean,
How to incorporate the musicians?
yeah, how to incorporate them better.
No, I mean, if you're gonna do that, certainly. I mean, yeah, for me, it's, you know, my pain points, not with your group, but with Cretan, is people come on, they play a song from start to finish, and if you've been to one Critical Coro, you know there's a lot of mandinadas in there, there's a lot of songs, a lot of feeling in that. So that, I don't know if you got that comment from me, I don't know how you would utilize musicians more. But yes, the mandinada callback, absolutely, sure.
And then, I'm sorry, I don't want to hog this, but one last thing was,
Quota of questions.
oh yeah, we have a group in, a primary group, and then a Division 1 and a Division 2 group. Would it be appropriate to use the same research with those groups? Be okay to share it, and the dances? And then secondly, is, the other thing is, if you have a dance that is danced one way in a circle, and then also as couples, but it's the same dance, is that considered one dance? If it has to break off, if it's actually danced as just a couple dance?
What are you talking about?
Right. What's the research?
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, and how many dances per performance? Is 3 okay? 3 long dances, or is it better to have 5 short ones?
That's really gonna depend.
You have 8 to 10 minutes, you don't have to use it all if you don't want to.
I once joked that I was gonna end my career with a 15-minute surdo. And that was it. Never happened.
Again, personal preference. If 3 to you, if it's boring to you at 3, then maybe you might need to add another one, right? But it could be a really exciting 15-minute surdo, or an patriotico, you know? So it's really, there's no quota, you have to, I mean, we want to see diversity of the round, but, you know.
Yeah, we can talk more on some of these detailed questions afterwards, and I'll come to you. But I think the part of that too, and a lot of these questions, as you're developing your show, like right now, you could be sending these questions and connecting and saying, hey, I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking about this for my show. I'm thinking of setting stuff up this way. What's your feedback? What's your thoughts? And open that dialogue so it's not a surprise when you get there. You've already had some of that feedback beforehand, and you had, well, while you still have some time to adapt.
So my question is about research. Do you have a preference on or how can we present the authenticity of research? Meaning, if you submit a YouTube video, obviously you're just taking a snapshot of that time and place. How do you improve the authenticity of the research? Is the general question.
Is one of us?
I think, yeah, as telling us as much information as you can on where you got your material. You know, if you're going to be doing Pontian, and you tell me that your source is Nikos Unazidis or Kyriako or something, gives me a point where I know what we're looking at. So if you say nothing, and I don't know if it was some Hasapi from the village at time, but you know.
So as a quick follow-up, you guys all have your resources that you know of or that you trust. Is it possible for, let's say as a reference for directors, you as researchers and as judges to maybe compile a list of known resources or individuals that you trust and who we can maybe turn to and help us develop that list so that it's a little bit more concrete? And again, I mean, this conversation should be happening and can be happening with you before we start teaching or before we get to FDF, but can you help compile maybe a listing of those individuals?
And it's not necessarily wrong to be using the casabe from the village. So I just want to make that clear, but just to know.
Now it went out of my head what I was gonna say. You were gonna say something. Get my,
Like I said, was just what Louis said. You give us as much information as you can. Videos, your write-up, you know, if you want to give us an article that you saw somewhere, that's fine. Just know, by the way, those of you who submit articles in Greek, that some of us cannot read or understand enough Greek to be able to read an article in Greek. So if you give us something in Greek, we won't necessarily know what you're giving us. But a video helps, something you write up, the sources where you got this information from, a video of somebody lecturing about it, you know, anything you can give us is helpful. Just be aware of the amount of volume that you give us. The more you give us, the earlier you better give it to us so we have time to read it.
Sorry, just a really quick, and I'll just speak loud because I don't even make it up. Let's say we see something different, and it doesn't matter from what region. Would it be beneficial to us to give it to the quote-unquote specialist judge for that region to get their less?
We all see everything. We capture them. Whatever you send to anybody, it goes to everybody.
Yeah, but before we teach it,
Oh.
you can say, you know what? Yes.
Yes, if you want to send it to that specialist to give you feedback
what I'm
on
saying. Would that
it
be-
before December 31st.
Okay.
So my question is with research as well, and I think the biggest problem with the research is I work for the military, right? And we call it a triple S. You know, big generals, they don't have time to go through 50 pages of documents. So it's a very quick synopsis of telling you you know, you need to focus on page 1, 2, and highlight the areas. Is there some way to develop, I think the new directors are not giving research, a template, I want these 5 standard things in order to help you guys too be able to see. I feel like sometimes you guys are rushed. You guys have one day to cram in all of this research, and then people who are doing something new might not get the allotted time that you really need to be able to focus on what this new materials that they're bringing in. So I'm not looking at more of a comment, but I'm a challenge to help streamline the research process, to create it so it's efficient for you guys in terms of, you know, having this, you know, 5 key factors, exactly 45 seconds or whatever it is, whatever you guys need to be able to quickly and efficiently see what that director is trying to say. And then the question also is, do you talk about in that research what your set's going to be like, right? I'm doing a wedding set. Do you need me to say that? Or do you just want to focus on, you know, do you want me to take you through my thought process of this is what I'm putting on stage, this is what you're seeing, right? So, you know, a lot of these directors I feel don't know that. They're just saying, I'm doing a quick 7, 8, 9, 10. It's a lift rather than a touch. So, you know, I think a little bit of guidance in terms of what you guys are looking for. A lot of people don't know how to write research papers. It's daunting. And then you get so much. And then you're not able to sift through it. So I'm just saying maybe there's some room for improvement.
You don't have to have a research paper.
Huh?
You don't have to have a research paper. You're submitting your resources. You don't have to submit a research paper. Just give us a basic idea of what your resources were. I mean, if you have a research paper you want to submit, we love to have the information, but if you're going to do something lengthy, you should also do this is the short and sweet version that you need to watch our suite. This is, if you want to submit a research paper, that's to say this is where all that came from. That's, I mean, we always love more information, but we can't necessarily read 50 research papers. Also give us, these are the dances we're doing. In dance number 4, we're doing the lift instead of the touch, blah, 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 or something like that. But I think a template for new directors is a great idea.
But are you volunteering? Well, I mean, so that's the bottom line. You're looking at us. Now, we've been trying to do this for a number of years, even amongst ourselves. It took Manoleli here, you know, several emails, and we got it together. So, I mean, to his and Manoleli's credit. But I think at the same time, there's a lot of advanced and I guess I'll say advanced and not old, but there's a lot of advanced directors in this room that you can all get together and, figure out what you want to submit, and it can be. And some of you are married to others, so, whatever, it can work out. We can talk.
I'm happy to work with the directors. I think I can help build a template as long as I know what you guys need, right? What are the five things that need to go on the template?
I don't think that there is anything like that. I don't
think we would want it to be that structured. I think we want to have information that you want to submit. That is important to you in showing us your suite. What is it you would like us to know? More than what is it we want to have to know. I think that's, to put a template together makes it too rigid, too structured. I think it's better if you, the directors, put together whatever it is they would like us, whatever they'd like to share with us, whatever they want to educate us with, so that's my feeling about it.
So are the videos then more important than the research papers?
It has to go, in some ways, it's must, for me anyway, it's helpful to have both the video and the write-up, because then I go back and forth and look at the two together.
The write-up tells you where these videos are coming from. Right?
Yes, and what it is that I'm looking at, what it is that I'm looking for.
One of our favorite people from Las Vegas.
What about allowing research to become public information after a set amount of years, 5, 6, 7 years? So in that way, you can look back, even if it is 5 years older, you can look back and say, well, this is what was done. It'll help groups that are probably holding on by a generation or two at the smaller communities because maybe they don't have enough money to find resources. And that way it can be somewhat of like a thesaurus or a dictionary of.
I'll talk to that really quick too, even though I'm not up there.
We get copyrighted material too, but stuff that can't be released.
We've received copyrighted material, so things that we can't release, it's really not. Just contact the director, yeah. Whatever you saw, you liked it, like, hey, that's great. I mean, you don't need to be spoon-fed from us. Take initiative, email, jump on it. If they don't want to tell you, they don't tell you.
And if anyone has any questions for what a certain group performed before videos and whatnot, Renee has FDF of 31 years on yellow legal pads with every comment, detail. So, yeah, I mean, 1982, M through N, she's got it. So.
We discussed this at one of our board meetings, FDF board meetings, and that same issue came up. Is it in FDF property now, and we can give it out to anybody who wants to do something? We never solved the problem, so it protects people who have copyrighted stuff.
There's there's an organization I know of now that is going to be working to create a library of sorts, and I think that us as directors, as well as the people who have spent time and their own money and life savings and time themselves, developing and obtaining the research or performing the research. I think that has to be a meeting of the minds as to kind of how we want to perceive this moving forward. But if, let's say, you guys in Vegas or some of these smaller communities, similar to what we're doing with Koinonia in the spring, there's a lot of great resources that here are locally amongst our own communities that we can reach out to and tap into. Not just the judges, but directors that you respect or that you've seen that can come and help or can show you videos they have. They might be able to share them in a refined format, in a way that they're comfortable with, or they might be able to reach out and ask for permission to share that with you from the person they got it from or the original source. But there's still some channels, but there's ways that we can all support each other to kind of make this happen and make sure everybody has the resources they need, I think. Any other questions?
I remembered what I forgot. This goes back to good resource material. Even if you get a good, I had a group use a good resource from Greece and then not do well with the information they got, because I'm sure the people in Greece were not aware of what we were aiming for. It was much more of a performance type of thing rather than a presentation, try to imitate the Horyo. And they did it much more in a performance choreographed style, even though they had a good resource for the steps and style. And so they were very confused and, well, they were very upset that they stated their resources and that how could we question their resources because and I said, those were good resources, but what they may not have realized what you were going to be using it for, and what we were aiming at was not quite what they produced. So just keep that in mind too. You may ask your resources, say, now we're not trying to do a dance performance for blah, blah, blah. We're trying to get something that's more like the real deal. And they will help you with the fine points more in that kind of a vein. So be sure you're letting your resource know what you're going to be using it for.
So we can definitely ask some more questions afterwards if people stick around, but can we please have a big round of applause for our judges panel? Definitely went a little over, but thank you very much for your time. Stelios has one more comment.
Round of applause for Mr. Manolelli here.
So remember, we're all connected as directors, we're all connected with these judges, we're all trying to serve the same purpose of teaching our dancers, bringing the best out of them, and in turn helping each other to be the best versions of ourselves as directors. So the one thing that we're going to start pushing out too is there was discussion of these conferences that used to take place on the West Coast. There's discussion within the Koinonia Foundation of potentially doing a weekend seminar, and we'd like to poll some of you who are here and some of you online watching as to if you'd be interested in having a 2-day seminar with Glendy on a Saturday night and instructors from Greece or anywhere else teaching. So keep that in mind because we need more resources here on the West Coast, and if we do bring that, we're going to need your support. So thank you very much for coming out, thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you much for your time.